Hey y'all, I am sitting here doing my fall garden planning and wanted to talk about a plan that I am sort of formulating as this process is going on for next season. Just like at the beginning of every garden season, you have to plan. Sometimes you have to plan for certain events in your gardening sort of journey, right? Or every garden year is going to have different focuses and priorities. And unfortunately, we couldn't do it this year just because we didn't have the infrastructures in place, the pre-planning that went into place. We are from Virginia, relocated to Texas about this time last year, a little bit earlier, and then actually came back in May of this year. We came back in April of this year, but we're able to get our garden in May of this year, 2023. And so that meant doing a lot of things that were not ideal, but it was either we did them that way or we didn't grow food. Period, end of story. And given the current climate of both our food system, our country right now, even locally, some things going on with us, we just felt like not growing food was just not an option. But I want to talk about, in planning my fall garden, sort of the steps that are going into formulating this idea for next year. And what that is that I want to do a completely 100% no-cost gardening operation for next year. And that is for our main food garden. We have 400,000 would be a lot, 400 square feet of gardening space. That does not include like garden walkways and things like that, but the beds that we are actually planting in is 400 square feet. You can grow a lot of food in 400 square feet. Now, starting seeds late, not getting everything planted until May, there was not as much planning as went into the spring and summer garden as I probably would have liked. However, I think we've done pretty well. We're just starting to pull out some things for our harvest, like our cucumbers. I'm so thrilled with. We're going to be harvesting corn in probably less than about a month. We're going to be harvesting green beans here very soon, and then tomatoes, again, probably another couple weeks, and we'll start seeing some of those. So really, really exciting. But, in sort of getting everything ready and, planning the fall garden, there's a lot of things that have to go into planning to not spend any money for our spring 2024 garden. The first thing is planning seed saving. I have a huge container. This thing right here. This is a 7-gallon square tote full of seeds. And I mean, it is full jam-packed of seed packets, little herb jars that I've saved seeds in. We've got so many seeds, but I am planning on doing a very heavily planted garden this year. I'm going to sort of do something around the square foot gardening method. For those of you who don't know what it is, I'd encourage you to go look it up. There's plenty of books and YouTube videos and other folks that talk about exactly what that is. But I'm going to do something a little bit more closely to that, just because, again, you get more out of your garden space. You make better use of companion planting that way. And so that is my plan for our fall garden. As we are starting to pull things out of our summer garden, there is quite a bit of seed saving that is going to happen. And sort of what got me thinking about this, so the other day we were out, we had a kale plant that actually came with us from Texas, and had left it in the ground. We harvested a little bit of kale off of it, not very much, and it went to flower. It had aphids all over it. So I left it there because I was like, it's in a grow bag. I'm going to end up using that grow bag. I'll probably pull the plant out and use the soil at some point, just compost it. And what ended up happening was the kale plant went to flower and then produced the seed pods. And I was able to save a good amount of kale seeds. See, there you go, you can see that a little bit better. From that one kale plant. And I have tons of kale seeds, in seed packets. So I don't really need these. However, this is a sort of pre-planning that it requires to do something like saving all your seeds so you're not having to purchase for next year. And again, tons and tons of resources. This day and age with the internet, I will never accept the excuse that somebody says, I just don't know how to do it. Go read a book. Watch the 10 YouTube videos that are available on doing any given thing. I think YouTube is just an amazing tool to be able to learn things. I have used it both in my personal and professional life. In my professional life, I'm an accountant and we use Excel a lot, and there are some things that I didn't know how to do in Excel, and so, it's great to run through a couple of those online tutorials and learn how to do something. But you can pretty much find any video on how to save seeds from any plant that you can save seeds from. So, I think, you can find those resources, but for us, that is going to be a priority. So for next year, peppers, tomatoes, things like that, as we're pulling them out of the garden, I will be looking ahead and saying, okay, this tomato, we're setting it aside to save the seeds from. You can save seeds out of peppers, cucumbers, squash, all of those things. Sometimes you have to let them get to a certain ripeness or a certain stage in order to save the seeds. You can't save the seeds if you harvest them too early. Beans, like green beans, are like that. I learned, unfortunately, the hard way. I have tried so many years. This is now my 3rd year trying to grow autumn zebra pole beans because I think the bean is so cool looking. It is like this speckled purple and white bean, and you would use it like you would like a pinto or a black bean. They say it is better used in like Asian dishes. It's kind of got more of that like soybean texture and a bit of an umami flavor. So I saw that my autumn zebra pole beans were ripe on the thing. They had this nice purple and green marbling on the outside of the pod, and I pulled them, went to open the seed pod, and the bean inside the pod was just green. It was just this light, very light colored green, right? And so that's not the proper stage to be able to dry those beans, save them, and either use them for like soup, stews, stir fries, whatever, or be able to save them for next year. I learned the hard way. That pod has to dry on the vine in order to be able to save those seeds. So just as much as there is information out there, the other way you can figure things out is just by trial and error. So we won't be getting as many zebra pole beans as I probably would have liked, but you know what? This was a good learning opportunity, and I still have some seeds in the packet. Seeds will last for years. You have to keep them in a dark, dry, cool place. You don't want them in heat. Would not recommend probably keeping them in the garage. My bucket of my gallons of seeds, they stay in my closet, out of the sunlight, in a dark container where it's dry, and they will be good for future years. So I have seeds in here. I know, like my Brussels sprout seeds, Catskill Brussels sprouts, a Fairy and Morse seed packet that I bought at Lowe's at some point, and 3 years later I was still getting germination off of those seeds. I have never been able to grow Brussels sprouts well, but that's, use your air, that's not really the seed's fault, and I know that. So so that's one of the things, like, yes, I'm planting my fall garden. It's very simple on a white sheet of paper. We have graph paper sitting around here somewhere, but I think honestly it's probably in a storage unit in a box. So I'm just starting to do this so I know how many seeds I need, and then from that we'll determine how many seeds I'm going to need and save for the next fall garden. Also considering, you know, saving seeds from our spring and fall, or our spring and summer garden, as I'm pulling things out and just thinking about, like, okay, these, you know, pineapple tomatoes are one of my favorite tomatoes. I'd like to grow a lot of these next year. Let me, you know, make sure that I'm saving all of the seeds. One, you know, slicer tomato has a good amount of seeds in it. So that is number one thing I'm doing. Number two is focusing on compost. Soil and dirt and compost are one of the most volume-wise largest components of our garden, but also one of the most costly. And when I said at the beginning, like, how we sort of had to do things this year was not ideal. Our property is 5.4 acres of primarily wooded land. The woods allow amazing opportunity for growing certain things, some like mushrooms, shade-loving plants, basil, spinach. You know, some of those things will grow just fine in the shade, or speckled shade. But, you know, to grow things like tomatoes and peppers and corn, you need, you know, 6 to 10 hours of full sun on a garden. And so we knocked down, I don't know the exact square footage or acreage. My guess is it probably was about an acre of trees that we took out for where the garden area was going to go. We had to build an earthen bridge basically from the main part of our property where we are building our house to where the garden area is in the back part of the property. And where the house is going to go, those trees were already taken down. So probably altogether, we've probably taken out about 2.5 acres of trees, which, you know, there's an ecosystem in a forest. The trees support each other in different ways. And so, yes, in a lot of ways, when you talk about, you know, permaculture and, you know, sort of letting the land do what the land needs to do, that is not ideal. However, we want to grow food for our family. We want to grow food to be able to preserve and, you know, eat over a season. And in order to do that, what we had to do was just take down trees. And then we also had to level the ground. That probably, more so than taking down the trees, was the more detrimental part to our soil, because we were having to dig down, get roots out, some of them very big roots. And so basically we stripped off all of the topsoil off of an entire acre where our garden is. Now, we have since planted millet and buckwheat, and then in the fall we will plant cool weather crops to try and build that soil back up. And that's not even, you know, the area that we're raising in. That is the paths and walkways and the parts outside of the garden, right? Because we want to build back up the natural soil. We have a good mix of pines and deciduous trees, but as the deciduous trees lose their leaves every fall, that will start to build back up the topsoil, but it is going to take years and years. And here in Central Virginia, we are working with mostly clay. Now, we found in building our earthen bridge that actually there is a good amount of clay, and underneath that clay is a silt layer. That silt is probably a little easier to work in and work with, but you know, there's not a lot of natural soil. So we had to bring in 400, enough soil to fill 400 square feet of garden bed, several inches deep. We will in the fall also be amending with compost, so a couple inches of compost on top of that, which we will be purchasing. But next year, I would like to be able to start using our own compost and take that expense away. Now, this is a goal of mine. I do not know at this point if we are going to have that volume to be able to use. But we're working very hard to use, you know, again, the natural leaf mulch that we have available, which if you put till leaf mulch in with clay, it will actually help break it up and really help the natural biome of the soil over time. Now, again, it takes several years and it takes a lot of that happening, but it will. And so we're utilizing that. We make our compost with, you know, all of our scraps. You can add paper, cardboard, as long as there's not too much paint, ink, plastic tape, things like that on it. You can put all that into your compost pile. There are so many things that you can compost, with probably the exception of like dairy and meat. Again, the caveat to that meat rule is eggshells are great, and things like fish bones, fish entrails, if you fish and you know, are cleaning out fish, that stuff is fantastic in your compost. So we are doing all of that. We are working hard to build our compost, and I'm hoping by next spring, by adding in, you know, friends that are cleaning out their chicken coops and friends that, or neighbors that raise horses and have horse manure, that we can get enough of that to be able to, you know, amend our beds with our compost instead of having to purchase that out. So seed saving and compost are probably the two biggest things that we are working on. The other thing, obviously, having cut down all those trees that we have an overabundance of, are logs. And so with the logs, I would like to find a way to maybe build up, because currently we just have basically one log that is serving as the markers for our garden beds, right? It's serving as the edging for our garden beds. We do also have a fair amount of granite and quartz rock on our property. And so, you know, some of our garden beds, I think that is such beautiful edging for a garden bed. So some of our garden beds, we're probably going to change around a little bit and use that as some of the edging. But I also would like to build up in height the edges of the beds. And so we're probably going to try to end up doing some sort of dowel system with holes and dowels in it, drilling holes into a log and putting another one on top of the one that's already existing, so we can kind of build up the height. Now, over time, those logs will break down and we will end up having to replace, but you know, we are changing our garden beds every season. And so, you know, this is something that I think, you know, we will be able to do and amend and change over time. The only piece of the sort of no-cost operation that I really have not gotten figured out yet is the cover crop. My plan is to cover crop certain beds, rotate certain beds, and, you know, by cover cropping, let that bed rest. Either cover cropping with clover or peas, which fix nitrogen, or, you know, other things. Mowing that cover crop down, letting it lay in the soil, and again, just adding natural nutrients and amendments to the soil that way. So that is something that I'm still having to figure out, because in order to cover crop, you need a large amount of seeds and you have to grow a large amount of seeds. Now, we purchased a 50-pound bag of millet and a 50-pound bag of buckwheat. So far, the buckwheat has really taken off. And one benefit of the buckwheat that we did not know, but have since found out and are so thrilled with, is that it has brought in the honeybees. The bumblebees, honeybees. We have a butterfly bush, and I haven't seen any butterflies on it, but I've seen plenty of bees on it. So, you know, supporting the things that support your garden, bringing in beneficial insects. And the buckwheat has really done that. And so I think we are going to let all of the buckwheat that is in the pathways and things go to seed. I am going to attempt to save those seeds and use that as cover crop next year. Buckwheat is a warm weather cover crop, so I'm going to need to sort of figure out a cover crop for. So I'm going to have to figure out some sort of solution for cold weather cover crops. Maybe we'll end up saving some of the peas that we plant this year. And drying those and using them as cover crop. I just don't know yet. So that for the most part is sort of my plan for a no-cost garden next year. The only thing that I could really see going awry is, you know, us not having enough compost to amend. And, you know, if that's the case, then we will end up having to purchase a little bit, but I am really going to try not to. Now, the reason that we are going to try to do a no cost garden for our vegetable garden next year is because we have a couple things that we are adding to our farm that are pretty pricey. And, you know, I know everybody's finances is different, but, you know, for us, we kind of have a threshold of, you know, like for the farm, we don't spend any more than this per year. And if it's not feasible that year, then we wait until the next year until that money is saved. But we are going to start bees next spring, and originally we were just going to start with 2 hives, but you know, in looking at, I took a bee course a while ago, and just kind of understanding all of the many things that can wipe out a hive very quickly, and the very few things that you as the beekeeper can do to try to keep that hive healthy, I think we would rather try to err on the side of caution and with some added insurance. So we're actually going to start with 3 hives next spring, which means probably December, January of 2023, 2024, we're going to be ordering all of our supplies. We are actually not far from Dana and Sons, that is down in just a little bit south of us. So we can also go pick up our beekeeping supplies, and then ordering our nooks to arrive hopefully in April. So we are very excited about that. The first year beekeeping, you don't harvest honey. You can, but your bees likely will not survive a winter if you do. The second year, if your hives are strong and they're great producers, then it's okay to harvest some. Usually by the 3rd year, if your hives have thrived and they are healthy, then you can start harvesting kind of a regular amount of honey. So it is an investment. It is a long endeavor. However, having honeybees on the farm, I think, will increase pollination. You know, it will change really the landscape of our farm. It will do a lot of things for us, and actually our neighbors also. So bees are just wonderful. They're really fascinating. If you have the opportunity to take a bee class or do any reading, I would encourage you to do so. They do so much, and how they, you know, how the whole hive functions is just really interesting. It's like a commune that just runs absolutely perfectly. It's incredible. But yeah, because we are adding that, and that has such a huge expense associated with it, that is why we are trying to cut costs in other areas for our operation next year. And I really honestly would like to get up to having either 20 to 30 hives, but we're going to start with 3 and see how that goes. So that's kind of my plan. This is how I'm planning for it, and working towards that goal. And yeah, we're going to see how it goes. So we'll bring you guys along, keep you posted. But thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.